Okay, everyone. Good evening and welcome to your CICD GitHub Actions class. For those of you that just joined us, we are taking a class again. So in this class, we'll be discussing CICD. We'll be taking a much more simpler approach with simpler examples, right? And I have an app set up already, which will serve for our use. Yes, I think it's open. So I'll start by talking about CICD. Okay. Uh, what is CICD? What is it about? It's not a programming concept, or it's not anything that will help you, write code better. Okay. But as a developer, why do you need it, right? So CICD, first of all, CI stands for continuous integration, and CD stands for continuous delivery and deployment. Okay, so like the name suggests, when you hear integration, you get the idea of putting something into an already existing thing, making it fit together with the whole. Okay, so that's basically what integration is all about. When you have a code base, you implement something new, you integrate it into the already existing code base. That's continuous integration, right? And that integration process might require steps like the linting, that's uh, checking the structure of the code, whether it matches with the consistency of the code base, formatting, and of course testing to see whether the code actually passes tests. So that's the integration part. Yes. Then the delivery and deployment part, like the name suggests, is releasing the software. Okay, releasing the software to where it is going to run if it is a production software, right? For as a mobile developer, that would be building your APK file or building your app bundles and maybe pushing to the different stores for your users to get updates and download the updates, right? That's the delivery and deployment. So why do you need CI/CD, right? CI/CD actually helps you detect bugs early by running continuous integration on code. Whenever you make your pushes, you can detect bugs early if you have integration tests set up. It can reduce manual steps. Normally without CI/CD, what you normally do is, manually build your APK bundle, upload it to the Play Store site or wherever it needs to run, or any store you're using, doing those things manually, but those things can be automated. They're actually redundant tasks and repetitive. Okay, so CI/CD kind of takes that redundancy and repetitiveness of a task away from you, so it can be much more productive. Okay, and it encourages collaboration and clean code practices by running linting and formatting. Yes. Yes. Okay, so that's CI/CD, right? So how about GitHub Actions? How does GitHub Actions relate with CI/CD? What's the relationship there? So basically, there are many CI/CD tools out there. Okay, CI/CD mainly is an area for DevOps people. That's what they're most concerned with. But it doesn't hurt to know the concepts as a developer. Because it can be a very useful tool belt to have. It's a very useful tool to have in your tool belt rather. Okay, so GitHub Actions basically is a native CI/CD tool built into GitHub, right? GitHub is already a very big platform for software development, right? So it just makes sense that they will have a CI/CD tool to make life easier for developers, right? Okay, so that's GitHub Actions. It's basically a native CI/CD tool that is built with GitHub. Okay, so it basically uses things called workflow files. Okay, to architect CI/CD workflows, right? So inside the workflow files is where you'll be writing I'm used to applying where you'll be writing scripts, things, steps, jobs that your CI/CD workflow will incorporate. You put them inside this workflow files. Right. So we'll be seeing how to auto workflow files. We'll be looking at the basic structure of the workflow file, the implications, and I'll be explaining things as we go along, right? Well, I've already prepared some examples, some working examples before time, but I'll still take it bit by bit to make sure that we are all following. Okay. So head over to my VS Code right about now. I will do that. So we start by over that. Yeah, please give me a thumbs up if you can see my VS Code. Well, okay, beautiful, right? So I've already set up some basic CI/CD workflow, right? But I'll be taking it from the top just to make sure we follow step by step. Okay, so we'll call this new dot. Okay. Call this new workflow dot YAML. Okay. So the basic structure of a CI/CD workflow, you first of all have to give it a name. Okay. So we'll name this um mm, beautiful. So after the name, we now move over to the event triggers. Okay, so what are event triggers in a workflow, right? Remember I said CI/CD are kind of things that run on your code to automate manual processes, things you normally do manually. So you have to kind of configure um the timing, when does it run? Okay, kind of configure those conditions that will trigger the run. Okay, and since it's something that's attached to your repository, you can do things like configuring it per branch. Let's say when you push to a particular branch, or when you make a pull request against another branch. So all these are event triggers. So you can configure them in this workflow. So the idea is the configuration is going to be used by GitHub to determine when to run your workflow. Okay, so we're going to do simple trigger. This new workflow. How do you do the trigger thing? Okay, you do an on first, on push, specify the branches. Okay, you can do this, or you can do this. Okay, so now we have a trigger set up, right? So anytime we push to the branch main, any of the things that is in our workflow file will be run. So this is like a common mistake people make, right? So having event triggers wrong is an easy problem to fix, right? Okay, so anytime you have a workflow that is not running, always check the event triggers to make sure that they are correct. Okay. So after setting your event triggers, what's the next thing you do? You set up your jobs. Now, what are jobs, right? Okay. Jobs are kind of an entity of organization for workflows. A job represents an irredeemable entity is because it runs on a specific platform that you give it, right? And a job can consist of a sequence of steps. Okay. So let's say you have a workflow that has the steps of packaging your app, uploading it, signing it, doing all those things. All those things are individual steps. So you can group all of them into something called a job, and you can give it a configuration as to where it's going to run. Okay, to run jobs on with GitHub Actions. You have Windows, I think. But the popular one is Ubuntu and Mac. Okay, so Ubuntu is a Linux distro. Ubuntu is a Linux distro. Uh, and it's used heavily in virtual machines. So your workflows basically are going to be running on virtual machines in the cloud. So how do you specify the job? First of all, do job. Okay. Now do a runs on Ubuntu latest. So this means our job will run on an Ubuntu latest OS of a virtual machine. Okay. You can also set this to Mac OS latest. Okay. If you set it to Mac OS latest, it means that you're going to be using a Mac OS virtual machine. And you know the advantages of using a Mac OS with things, right? But with Ubuntu and Windows, you don't have access to Xcode. With Mac OS, you can be able to build iOS packages. So you set this to go to latest, you give your link. Okay? So we specified where the uh where our job is going to run on. So we can now start adding the steps. Okay. So we have this first step. We have this first step. This is basically like boilerplates. I'm sure you know what boilerplate code is, right? When you're working with Flutter, you need to set up Flutter for that particular does that for you. So you can see here now we can actually use the run command. This is equivalent to doing a Flutter pubget in your terminal. So basically what happens here is that the virtual machine is going to be running this particular run command that is specified here in this terminal. Okay, so that's what happens here, right? And we have the get build runner because this project uses build runner because build runner is now wrong. You're going to have what issues when you run the Flutter analyzer, the linter, right? So and here we have the Flutter analyze, which is the command we want to run, right? Okay, beautiful. Okay, so what do we do now? I think I need to delete this. I need to delete these other ones. I need to delete this one so we don't have duplicates. Okay, because your hand is up.
Yes, sir. Please, I'm seeing here that this job, the steps, some have name and uses. Name uses.
Mhm.
While this other one has name run, name run. So which one is actually like in this one where there is name uses? Name is checkout repository and then uses is action. Is there anything running there? It's only the ones that have run that are running something.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that question. Right. I think I skipped the explanation for that. Okay. So what was happening here is that I explained, this is like boilerplate. I'm sure you know what boilerplate is, right? So the idea is that this action slash checkout is like a pre-built action that people did and published on the GitHub. It's like a package when you use packages in your code. Okay? People built and published to make working with Flutter CI/CD easy. So they published it on the GitHub Actions marketplace. So, if you want to use it, this is how you use it, right? Okay, you do a uses, you get the action signature name and everything. If the action takes parameters to run, you can specify it with this with attribute here. Okay, you can see that this supposito Flutter action v2 takes a parameter of channel. Basically configures the channel, the Flutter version and everything that you want to set up for that particular CI/CD run, right? So yeah. So likewise, you have many other actions, previewed action that can help you do different things. For instance, you want to upload something to Appetize, you can automate that with your CI/CD. You want to upload to your Play Store, App Store, if you already have developer account set up, you can automate that with CI/CD such that once you fix a bug with a new feature, you automatically build the release and release to your users. So you can do all that with CI/CD, right? So I hope that answers your question, Ngozi.
Yes,
Does that
sir.
answer your
So
question?
yes, please. So you're saying that this uses is the actual action that is being taken. This name can be anything, right?
Yes, name is also like to give it a tag to for you to be able to identify it.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay.
Okay. So now we have this thing set up. What does this do? So let's go over the definition first. You see, the name is new workflow. On push to the branch main, you can add other branches here, but this project doesn't have other branches, just main branch, right? So on push the branch main, set up our router on an Ubuntu virtual machine, and we'll run these things to make sure everything is okay, right? So how do we actually run this CI/CD workflow? So you do a commit first. And mind you, note that this file is located inside .github/workflows. Okay, so it has to be inside this folder so that GitHub can identify and recognize it as a runnable workflow. If it is not inside .github/workflows, GitHub doesn't recognize it as a runnable workflow. Okay, so that's something to note. So before we push this, let's make sure our project doesn't have linting issues, because if it has linting issues in our local machine, obviously when it is running in the virtual machine, it's going to fail. Okay, so the whole idea of this is to make sure that our code doesn't have linting issues, and I think our code has a bunch of them. Ooh, a bunch of them. Okay, lots of deprecations. So let's see the ones we can fix automatically with the command dart fix apply. Okay. Yeah, I think this will be um So let's run Flutter analyze again. Project. Let's see the ones we can fix. And there's still a lot. Okay, so we'll use another project here to demonstrate. So let's use this one. Okay, so this one is a project that does not have CI/CD set up already, but it has a remote repository. I'm sure most of you must have cloned it on your tasks, right? Okay, beautiful. This one has fewer link issues. So the essence of doing this is so that you can see a successful workflow run. Okay. Okay, since you're not using these test files, just going to go ahead and write them. Also, you can do CI/CD workflows that run your tests automatically. I think I have mentioned that. You can use these CI/CD workflows that run your tests automatically. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up CI/CD for this particular one. The first thing you should do is create it as GitHub directory in your root project. .github like this. Then a subfolder inside it named workflows. Workflows, right? So inside this workflows folder is where you put your workflow file. So we'll just name this linked workflow dot YAML. Okay. So already explained this part. Basically just give it a name. Give it a trigger on push. And push to branches. Okay. Main. And now here we specify okay, sorry about that, guys. So, and here we specify the job we want to run. Okay. So this job we call it linked job. We specify where it runs on. So it's going to run on an Ubuntu latest virtual machine. Okay. Going to run on Ubuntu virtual machine, and the job is a sequence of steps, and we have the linked job. This is where we start passing in the steps that would require us to run our job successfully. Okay, so first step would be name checkout code. Uses actions slash checkout at v4. And you can copy this from the internet or anywhere. It's just boilerplate, right? Like I explained. Okay. So the next step would be set up Flutter. Flutter. It uses Supposito. I think that's the name. The Supposito slash Flutter. Flutter action v2. Okay, so we'll just do a with channel stable, right? So after this boilerplate phase is where we actually now start putting the commands because our Flutter is set up. Our Flutter is set up on the virtual machine, right? So how do we do that? First thing we want to do is install dependencies. Install dependencies. Now this one is not a uses because it's our custom command, right? So we run Flutter for get. Okay. And the next one will be run analyze. It should be a command also. Flutter. It should be a command also. It should be Flutter analyze, right? And this project does not have a build. This project does not have a build runner first, so I don't think we need a build runner just to make sure. Okay, there's no build runner required. So since there's no build runner required, okay, so let me just quickly check the syntax of this YAML files, see if it's correct before we can run it. Because if your syntax is incorrect, your steps will not be interpreted correctly. So here we have the name on branch jobs. Okay. Steps. Okay. So hence this. Okay. Nika, your hand is up. Why is your hand up?
Okay, you are correcting what I just saw. Like I wanted to ask that the install dependencies and the Flutter were not starting at the same line, so that would that
Okay.
not cause an issue? But you were fixing it already.
Okay. So I think I have an issue in my VS Code. This thing happens sometimes. So let me just quickly close it and I'll reshare my screen again.
Okay, while you are doing that, can I ask some questions?
Yes, go
Or should
ahead.
I
What's the
wait?
question?
Okay, this Ubuntu, is it that Ubuntu works on, besides you said it's just a name. Does it have any effect? Like you used Mac OS before. Is it because you were using Mac OS or you set Ubuntu because Ubuntu can be for Windows and Mac OS, or is it just a name? It doesn't make much difference.
It's not the name. Ubuntu is the OS, is the operating system that your workflow is going to be running on. Remember, I said this workflow run on virtual machines, right? You know what virtual machines are?
Kind of.
Okay, virtual machines are just like computers in the cloud that can quickly spin up to do
Yeah, yeah,
something for you.
exactly.
Okay,
Yes.
so those virtual machines have an operating system. A virtual machine can have a Linux, Windows, or Mac OS. These are the three main operating systems. So for this virtual machine, you're saying that it should have an Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a Linux distribution, the Linux OS. Okay, so the name matters because there are some commands that are not available on a Windows that are available on Ubuntu, and there are some commands that are not available on Mac OS and some software not available on Windows, but they're available on Mac OS, right? So depending on what your workflow is, like I explained previously, for instance, if you want to build an iOS package in your workflow, you can't do it on an Ubuntu or a Windows. You have to do it on a Mac OS latest so that you can have access to the Xcode CLI build tools. Okay, so does that make sense, Kinika? Do you understand?
Yes, yes, it does. Then the other one I want to ask is this setup now. I'm really trying to understand, especially when you said something. Is it that when people are using your app and maybe you have an update, there's no need to? I didn't really quite get what you meant there. Is it that as we run our application after this setup, we don't need to be pushing, you'll just be updating what is there? And how does it
No,
link
no,
to
no.
our Play Store, like the application on the Play Store there? How does it, like, I'm trying to get the whole flow.
Okay, okay. Okay, so what I'm explaining right is that the idea of a CI/CD workflow is to automate otherwise manual steps. Okay, things you normally do manually. I give an example. For instance, if you wanted to upload a new update for your app for your application that's already distributed on Play Store. Normally, how you do that manually is after writing your code and committing and everything, you do it inside your own machine, you do a Flutter build app bundle and all those things. And when you finish that, you open up your Google Developer Console and you navigate to the dashboard wherever you need to go to, and you start uploading the file and Google review and all those things, right? So I'm telling you, those manual steps you took can be automated. You don't have to start anymore. All you have to do is just write your code and push. If you have those steps outlined in your CI/CD workflow, it is going to do that. Your CI/CD is going to do that for you. It is going to build the APK file for you, um, upload to Play Store and all those things, right? If you have it set up in your CI/CD, do you understand?
All right. Yeah, I understand it now. Understand it now. Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
beautiful. So we are doing a basic CI/CD for LinkedIn, right? This is like a continuous integration. When you write code, you want to check that the consistency is of standard, right? So that's this first example that we are seeing here, the one I've just authored right now. So okay, so I think everywhere is looking good, looking good. So like I said, why we abandoned the previous project was because it had LinkedIn issues that we cannot fix right now. So that was another project. So the Git status first. I'll do a Flutter analyze. That I can find the commands, the errors locally before I push. Okay. So couple of errors in the main.dat, couple of errors in main.dat. So just head over to main.dat, see the ones you can fix. Okay. Mhm. Show that error, show that issue. Okay, let me quickly correct this. It's here. Is it here? Okay, move. Come here, and I'll use them both. All right, all these things are potential linting issues. So if you don't have them already fixed in your application, the linting workflow is going to fail because of them, because that is what it's designed to do. Okay, now we have that fixed. Let's do a Flutter analyze first to make sure that it is fixed. Okay, beautiful. It says no issues found. That means we are ready to push. So quickly do a git status, git add, git commit, setup, basic, linting, workflow. Make sure we are on the main branch because our workflow is set up to be triggered on the main branch only. So we now do a git push origin main. Okay, beautiful. Our work has been pushed. Now let's go and look at the workflow run. Kinika, your hand is up. Your hand is up.
Yes, please. I wanted to know, like, the other project now. If we're working on our own project and we see this LinkedIn issue, it means that we'll have to fix everything, right? Before we can push the setup to GitHub.
Yes, of course. If you're running a LinkedIn workflow, and you have it set up on your code, you don't fix
Yes.
your LinkedIn issues in your code and you push, you're gonna have issues with the workflow run. Okay. So
Wait, you're saying every time I push my code to GitHub, I must make sure that I don't have LinkedIn issues.
that's if you have the workflow set up, if you have the CI/CD workflow set up to check your LinkedIn, to check LinkedIn for your code. Do you understand?
That's this GitHub action you just said, these jobs and steps, right?
Yes, if you have it set up on your code and
Yes.
you have it set up to check LinkedIn and you have LinkedIn issues in your code, when you push, you're going to obviously run into error. It's like you're giving a test. You have to pass that
Okay.
test. Do you understand?
Okay. Okay. Yes.
But
Yes.
if you
Yes.
don't
All
have
right.
GitHub Actions set up in your code, you don't have to be fixing. But it's always good practice to fix LinkedIn issues in your code because it suggests potential issues. Okay,
Okay.
so
So the
this Git,
best way. Okay, I
sorry.
wanted to ask that. Okay, before I was thinking that okay, I should finish my application before I set up the GitHub action. But now
No, no,
you're saying
you
that I
don't do
should do
that.
it.
Just like testing. Remember when I taught you about testing, right? You don't have to finish
Yeah.
the whole application before you start writing tests. You do them side by
Yes.
side.
All
Okay.
right. All right. Okay.
So
Thank you.
give me a thumbs up if you can see my browser.
Yes, we can see the GitHub.
Okay, beautiful. So let's go and see our inspect our workflow run. So you can see it shows this yellow golden something that indicates that something is running, right? So we head over to the Actions tab. GitHub Actions. Actions is where you can expect the workflow run. So we open up Actions, right? Oh, okay, beautiful. We can see that the workflow run has completed. Okay, you can see that the workflow run has completed. So let's this workflow. Remember, we gave the job a name of lint, if you can remember. So that is why it appears here. So this bears the name of the jobs. So when you click on it, it's going to open all the steps that are inside that job. Okay, it's going to open up the steps inside the job. Okay, so you can see all the steps are ticked good. You have the setup, checkout, go setup, Flutter, install dependencies, blah, 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 and analyze. Okay, so analyze run. If you open it up, you can see the logs of the run. In case there's an error, you can also see it here, right? For instance, let's say you set up a testing workflow that runs Flutter tests on your project whenever you make a push. If any test fails, you can see it will be shown in the logs there, and GitHub potentially send you an email saying your workflow failed, blah, blah, blah. You can click on details and go and see what failed. So the importance of this now is that if you have a test workflow set up and you push and your test is run and it fails, you can kind of find bugs faster before they are moved to production. So you don't push a buggy application or software to production to your users, because it can spoil your reputation and everything. Okay, so that's this is a simple workflow. Okay. So one more thing to note, right? Quickly go back to my VS Code. Go back to my VS Code. So there's really not much to CSC with GitHub Actions. It's quite intuitive, right? I know you might be looking at the syntax and you're feeling overwhelmed by it. I'm feeling overwhelmed by the syntax. How will I remember to know where to put on push branches, blah blah blah. But like I always tell anyone, the main thing to understand in software is the concept, the idea. Okay, the concept and the idea. Forget syntax. Forget nitty-gritty details. Understand the concepts. Understand how each tool is used. Because if you understand how this tool is used, now you are living an age of AI. You can quickly go and tell AI to uh, giving it the context, tell it to set up a basic workflow file that builds an application and uploads an artifact to some store, all those things, right? Because you understand the tool and how it is used. You don't need to remember syntaxes. So don't feel overwhelmed by syntax. Okay. So that's that. Another thing, right? Another thing to mention, worth mentioning about workflows and jobs is that I said a job runs on a particular platform, right? Like we have this job that is running on Ubuntu latest, right? We can have another job called tests. So we'll just duplicate this. This is not properly indented. Okay. So we'll just duplicate this, right? And we name this test. Okay. So the idea now is that instead of reading Flutter analyze, I do a Flutter test. Test my code. Or make it something much more professional. Run tests cases. Okay, so this assume that you have test cases set up in your project, right? I taught you testing, right? So you have test cases set up in your project, right? So this is what happens, right? You have this job that does a Flutter lint first. Well, not first. I'm going to explain in a bit. I have this job that does the test. Okay, so both of them are going to be run separately on different machines. So this one does not depend on this one. The first job the first job does not depend on the second job. Each of these jobs have their own separate steps. Okay, and they do their own work separately. Okay, so let's quickly see if we push this code, just be commit. It's commit. Just make sure we are staged for commit. Okay, git commit added the test job. Git push origin main. So we do a git push origin main again, and we'll go over to my browser to inspect the workflow run. So to explain what's happening. Sure, my browser must be up now. Okay, so like I said, if there are any issues in your code, you can always find it. Okay, looks like we have an issue with our YAML syntax. Okay, we have an issue with the YAML syntax. You can see that I am missing, if you look at it closely, you can see that I'm missing an indentation. After test, there's supposed to be an indentation. Okay, so like I explained earlier, if there's any issue with your syntax, your workflow is going to fail. So you always be on the lookout for that. Okay, so we'll just go back to my VS Code and correct that issue. So that I can demonstrate the running of two jobs. Okay, so let's just quickly correct that issue, right? So this needs to be indented just a little bit, indented. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we pushed again. We pushed again. So let's inspect what's going on. Okay, so beautiful. You can see that our latest push. You can see that with our latest push, you now have this yellow something that indicates that a workflow is actually running. So we can head over to the Actions tab to inspect the workflow. Well, so you can see that the commits I just made are shown up here. Okay. So beautiful. Okay, beautiful. So like I explained, you can see that the length and testing workflow are running side by side. As I said, they are running on two different platforms. Okay, so they're running side by side. So you can see that tests has an issue again, which is likely related to our code. So whenever your workflow fails, you can head over into the details to inspect why it is failing, like we are doing now. So you can check the logs. Okay, beautiful. You can see it says test directory test not found, and you can see that the reason that is because uh because this project does not have testing setup. So that's the idea. Workflows kind of help you catch issues faster for the integration. hence the name continuous integration. Okay, so like we saw in the browser tab, the linked workflow and the test workflow we are running side by side. Okay, but there may be a case where you need one to run after the other. Okay, maybe I need test to run after linked. So how you do that? Just into a needs, give it the name of the job that I want it to depend on. So what happens here now is that before test is run, GitHub says that it needs linked to run first. So to wait for links to finish before test is started. Okay, so let's set up basic tests in this project. Basic tests docs. Basic test doc for Dart. We'll set up a basic test case. Workflow tests. Okay. So we just go and expect true equals true, right? Okay. First of all, run Flutter testing. Flutter test in our terminal to make sure that our tests is actually working. Okay, beautiful. So all tests passes. So right now we can do a git add, git commit, and push again. Okay. So we do a git push origin me. Now we have test setup, the workflow, the job. So quickly head over to the browser. Head over to the browser to inspect the workflow. Okay, so click on the actions tab. Remember now we set test to depend, the test job to depend on the linked job. So before we saw them running side by side, but now you see something a bit different. Okay, beautiful. And you can see how it is configured. Previously, the test was directly under this one and it had this loading indicator to show that it's currently running. We can see because we set a dependency between test and link such that test depends on link. Okay, so test is now waiting for links to complete. So when links completes, test is going to start running. Okay, so links should be successful, complete at any time now, and test will start running. So while we wait for that, does anyone have any question at this point? I think we are coming to the end of the class. Okay, you can see link has successfully completed and test has started. Okay, so if you have any question, do not hesitate to ask while we wait for test to finish. When you click on the details, you can inspect the workflow run, like I mentioned previously. Okay, so that opens up the log. So you can see that it's currently running the step of setup Flutter. After running the setup Flutter step, we run the install dependencies Flutter. Okay, so you can inspect the logs here if you need all this information, right? So this is the test job that is currently running. So okay, so you can see that we are tracking it visually. Install dependencies step has run. the Flutter test case is now running, which should complete without any issues. Okay, beautiful. You can see now it says workflow test, one test passed. So now both our workflows now have the tick. Means that our code is good and everything is good, everywhere is good, right? So if you have any issues in your code and your workflow fails, you should always go back and inspect it because it is failing because you've said this thing is not as it's supposed to be, then it failed. Okay, so that's a CI/CD with GitHub Actions basically. Does anyone have any questions at this point? I think it's a bit straightforward. Okay, beautiful. I mean, everyone was following. So, in the answer to the question, thank you everyone for joining this class today. I will see you next week. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
I have a question, but it's not based on today's on the this topic. Just that I heard you talk about Google Developer Program. So I had